can we come, laying down every burden we carry, bringing all to the one whose gentle touch gives healing. We cry out in our weakness, holding on to your promise. Rejoice and be glad, for great is your...
Welcome back, everyone. It is Sunday service for Easter Sunday, March 2024. This is our second service, so thank you for sticking with us, with me. So before we begin our service, let's just start with a prayer. Let me just bring that up. Okay, let's join our hands in prayer. Our eternal Father, we greet you with joy this Easter season, the season of light and rebirth. Thank you for the gift of ever-renewing life. Bless this day, our loved ones, our family and friends, the food we enjoy and the earth that supports us. Help us celebrate the springtime in the north, the autumn in the south. Let us rejoice the everlasting, indwelling spirit within us that we remember through the resurrection. Amen. Okay, so next we will look at our ministry's mission. Our mission is to provide a safe and supportive space for individuals seeking holistic healing and spiritual guidance grounded in our faith in God. We believe that true healing comes from the connection to the divine and the recognition of the inherent divinity within each individual. We seek to honor the body, mind, and spirit connection through natural healing methods aligned with God's design for the human body. We strive to empower individuals to take an active role in their own healing process by providing guidance and support that's rooted in spiritual principles. And we aim to create an environment that fosters compassion, connection, and growth. Through our work, we hope to inspire others to deepen their faith in God and discover the transformative power of spiritual healing. Okay. All right. So last week we talked about prayer, and remember how we said that prayer is the asking, whereas meditation is more of the listening, and that when we ask, it's given. And so in the face of a problem, just an everyday problem, we can ask, well, how can I do this another way? And another thought, another idea might come in. Oftentimes too, we might, when we have a problem, consult a friend, share with a friend or a mentor, someone we trust, a family member. And so when we ask them for their help, then that's when they share their ideas. And what I'm getting at here is that all of it is God communicating to us. Because where do these thoughts come from? Where does the inspired thought come from when we ask, how could I do this another way? And where do the inspired thoughts come from when our friend's mind starts to organize itself to help us to find the solution? And so remember too how in the last service I was talking about how my sister passed away early in life. She was only 7 years old. And so after the funeral, we shared a bedroom. And so lying in bed, what would happen is the thoughts of her would just come in. And the thoughts were memories, the thoughts were of a future that we wouldn't experience, that we wouldn't see play out. And And so somehow it's different. It's different when a child passes away than when somebody who is a grandfather, who is at the end of their lives, grandmother, passes away, because they've lived their full story. But when a child passes away, there's the reaction, our grief is a much bigger rage. It's a much bigger upset, and it feels so colossally unfair. Whereas we can reconcile. So it's the passing away of the body is the same, but it's the timing, right? And it's our expectations of how a story, how a life gets lived. And when that whole story doesn't get to be lived, it feels very unfair and very painful for us. And so, we either externally or internally shake our fists at God. The grief is acute. And again, it's not to say we don't miss somebody who has, lived the full seasons of their life and have passed on. Like I mentioned that my dad passed away last month. The loss, the feelings are there and they're appropriate, but somehow it's different when it's a child. And so remember how I shared that, my mom's conclusion was simply just to eradicate God from existence, which what I surmise later is much easier than concluding that God must be a cruel God, because as she had succinctly said, what God, and what she meant by that is, what loving God, what loving father would have a child die before the parent. And so, so the alternative is that then, is that a possibility? Do we have a cruel and punishing God? And so when I would lie in bed, the thoughts would come in. And so to protect myself from this excruciating pain, I don't know, I constructed this, I guess, avatar of myself. So my little energy hands, or my etheric hands, my hands in my mind, in my imagination, would catch the thoughts as they were coming in. Because so first I prayed to God to have these thoughts stop, so I could just sleep, so I could just fall into a deep restful sleep. But they didn't stop. The thoughts didn't stop. And so my I guess coping mechanism, or my means of protection, was to catch the thoughts before they came in, crumple them up like a piece of paper, and then throw them back into the universe. So, I was seeing in my mind's eye that my little hands would catch the thought, crumple it into a ball, and then throw it back into the universe. But then again, it left me with something that I couldn't unknow, is that I'm not the one that can control my thoughts, that the thoughts come in. So now we have two questions, two dilemmas. And so that is, if a child of 10 is earnestly praying, is pleading, understandably, to be spared through the incoming thoughts of the great grief of the death of her baby sister, her little sister, and the prayer isn't heard, and the grief provoking thoughts still come in, again, do we have a cruel, unjust, unlistening God? And same, and if the child dies before her parent, do we have a cruel and unjust God? And then what kind of God lets his begotten son be crucified in a demeaning, excruciating, and deplorable way? So we're left with that. Do we have a cruel and unjust God? And then we're brought up with this great paradox where religion teaches us to fear God And yet at the same time, we're asked on the other side of the mouth to not fear God. So I pulled up some examples in the Bible where talking about the fear of God. And I've just got a couple, but let me just read through them with you. So Proverbs 1.7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So that's saying that there has to be a precondition of a fearful state of grace, or afraid, to be afraid. And that creates the conditions for true knowledge, for wisdom, for truth. Okay, so that's interesting. And we have Job 28:28. And to man he said, behold the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. And to depart from evil is understanding. And now in Job, we're differentiating between wisdom and understanding. And that's interesting. All right. And then we have Psalm 38:8. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. And it was this one that actually had me rethinking the word fear. And so I wondered whether the word fear, the word in the original language, whether it was Greek, Aramaic, or Hebrew, whether that fear had more robust meaning than the word fear, than how the word fear lands in the English language. And then finally, we have Matthew 10:28. Do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. And so Matthew is pointing to a greater power. And so again, that seems to point to more of an awe, an awesomeness, a reverence over what we understand to be fear. But sometimes we do feel afraid in something that we don't understand, or something that is awesome to us. So, so where my mind went with this is, so what if we aren't here to be safe? Many of you know that I practice the quantum healing hypnosis method, and that's a way to access the part of our consciousness that is the bridge to our divine consciousness, that is the part of our consciousness closest to God, if we're turning our attention and our will to connect with that part, to receive knowledge and wisdom. And what has come out of those sessions, more truthfully, is that we didn't come here to be safe. We are having this life experience in order to experience. And in order to experience it, many things, the myriad of what it is to be a human being, it doesn't necessarily mean safety is ensured. And also what we can't unknow when we think about our own lives and how they've gone, and our own direct experience, and mine truly, is that our greatest gifts often are born out of the adversity. The most excruciating adversity has provided us the greatest of wisdoms through the experience, a greater strength, a greater resilience, adaptability. And so what if Christ's martyrdom was through the story And there are other stories of martyrs as well. Joan of Arc is one who quickly comes to mind. And she's the subject that I chose to represent the martyr in my archetype card deck. But what if these stories of martyrdom are meant to be shocking? Because it's unimaginable. It's unimaginable to us, for ourselves or for a loved one or a friend or anybody in our community, to be crucified on the cross. It's unimaginable to us. And it's unimaginable that a loved one, a friend, somebody that we know in the community would be burned at the stake. And yet, even that is not actually that so deep in our history. We can, it's right there in medieval times. I think these martyrdom stories are actually impactful in order to wake us up in the now moment to when and where we crucify ourselves and we crucify others, because ultimately the Jesus story is all about judgment. And that's what we're trying to uncover, isn't it? That's what we're trying to kind of get up close and really look at it and pull it apart and see what's underneath the judgment, because we're coming back to, do we have a judging, cruel, and indifferent God? Or is something else going on? Is something deeper happening that we don't really afford ourselves the time to contemplate, especially when we're, everyday people living our everyday lives. But what if there is something deeper there for us to take on as a knowledge through their experience, through the experience of Jesus, through the experience of the likes of Joan of Arc? So we're being called to be afraid of God. But what if it's pointing to being so awestruck, to be so reverent, to venerate God, so that not living the way comes with consequences? That what if part of our experience here, our time here, is to, through experience, to feel what it feels like when our personal will is made more important than God's will, than the values and the morality and the goodness that he inspires us to be. So to walk in the way of God is to walk in the lightness of being, and is to live a life without sin, without egoic attachments, such as greed or the love of money, and to be in the world without fear. So what if all of this is to teach us truth and fearlessness, to reach beyond the story, beyond the grief, to something greater, to discover, like I said, something that's underneath. And what we find underneath it all, underneath the story, is that which is eternal. And the first page of the Course in Miracles teaches us that in a small stanza, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing real can be threatened. And so that questions our ideas of safety. Nothing unreal exists. And herein lies the peace of God. So let's look at how it's possible that a God could allow bad things to happen on his watch. So let's just imagine a father and a mother of high moral and social intelligence who love their children. And their greatest wish is that their children are to thrive, to be happy, to know God. But then when the children are grown into adults, one of the children aligns her personal will, her attention, and her action to, let's go with the love of money and other worldly things. And then the other child, he aligns his personal will, attention, and action to the thrill of stealing and, let's say, drug dealing. Now, they're adult children, so we know that the parents in our society don't have control over their children's actions. But we also know that it's certainly not in their will and not in their wish, and it's certainly not a requirement of their family dynamic for their children to malign their personal with that which is good and that which is moral and that which has integrity, but rather with sin. And so in the same way that a moral and loving parent cannot will nor want a life of sin, of distraction for their child, neither would it be then the will of the divine creator for Jesus's mortal life to be brought to an end in such a cruel and horrible way. During the whole last debacle of the last 3 years, a friend of mine said to me, we're born into a crime scene. And I've mentioned this before because this comment struck me. It was like a dawning moment. And so I've come to realize that this crime scene is ancient, and it goes far deeper into human history than just 2,000 years ago. And so Jesus's life's message was to call out. So yes, his life's message was forgiveness. His life's message was to seek the innocents because they know not what they do. But part of it was that he was also an advocate. He was calling out the corruption. He was calling out the hypocrisy, and he was questioning and calling out and suggesting other ways for these primitive rituals and practices, like sacrifice, for example. And so what we can surmise is that, what happened to Jesus at this time on Good Friday is an effect of the moral and spiritual immaturity of society as a whole. And so we can look at his life now from where we sit and choose differently. We've been given this opportunity every day. We are given an opportunity to start again and to choose differently, to not choose evil, to not choose sin. And so now we can ask, so what is evil and what is sin? And so remember how I talked about the Lord's Prayer in the last service, and so one of the lines is deliver us from evil. And then in John 2, we looked at that passage, and there was a part of the passage that said, you have overcome the evil one. And so how I can now define evil, and it manifests in this world in different ways, in varying degrees, but essentially at the core of it, evil is having forgotten who you are and where you come from. Evil is a willful ignoring of God's will, because this is the realm of manifestation and creation. And so our intent, and if our intent is to willfully go against God's will, then that has a consequence. And the evil can be embodied. It can be acted out. And so sin is the acting out of that which is of the, what I've come to say is the not self, the not true self, that which feeds off of guilt and fear and anger and power. Okay, so how are we doing so far? So this is our Easter service, right? So one of the questions that has come up too is, so did God forsake him when Jesus was there on the cross and he was heard to have said, it's written in Matthew, let me find it for you. Okay, so Matthew 27. The paragraph is 46, but let's start at 43. So he trusted in God. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God. The thieves also, which were crucified with him, cast the same in his teeth. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land, unto the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. And that is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Some of them that stood there when they heard that said, this man calleth for Elias. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave him to drink. So the vinegar is a sour wine that was often called a vinegar. The rest said, let us see whether Elias will come to save him. Now, what's interesting about this is that we can find these exact words in Psalm 22. Let me pull that up for you now. Psalm 22, paragraph 1. So to the chief musician upon Ijeleth Shaha, a psalm of David, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why art thou so far from helping me and from the words of my roaring? And so what we can also know about Jesus' story is that he was a scholar, he was a minister. And so here's the conclusion that I've drawn. In the same way, because I can only know things as I know them through myself. So here's what I'm thinking is that in the same way that I use the Lord's Prayer to focus my mind, I'd like to propose that Jesus was merely reciting a psalm to focus his in this moment when his only task is to stay vigilant and to experience the I guess the death of the human body. So perhaps in contrast to the notion, the interpretation that Jesus in that moment felt God had turned away, perhaps that is what I'm offering, is that is not the case, that he never left his faith, he never left his connection, but rather he was harnessing the power of his human mind to focus on a passage that he knew by heart. He knew the Psalms by heart. Okay, so a final thought before we take a break. And that is that that we, as we bear witness to this story, as we give the story permission to have meaning for us, that we're left with an awesome example of fearlessness in the face of a torturous death. And that is what we're being called to do, to be fearless. And that it's our human moral legacy to always be horrified, to be shocked and disgusted by any such callous and perverse examples of human immorality. And the crucifixion also reveals an unwavering love and mercy towards those who persecuted him, to the cruel, to the confused, to the immoral, which should in kind should stir the same possibility within our own hearts and our own souls. And so before we go to the break, this seems to be the story of triumph, of love over hate. Because if he could endure so much, how do our petty grievances compare? And how can we bring an affection and a curiosity and a love there? Okay, so it's time to pass the basket. And I just want to thank you for supporting the good work that we do here at the Elila Center Ministry, which is to help individuals to know their own, to know our own true and divine nature and to heal through it. So contributions can be made by check, made out to the Elila Ministry and sent to 430 Springfield Avenue, Suite 209 in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey. The zip code is 07922. Or you can use Zelle or PayPal if you prefer to contribute electronically. That's fine too. So thank you again. And we'll just have a little bit of a intermission and I'll be back shortly. Okay, so how are we doing? Are we hanging in there? All right, so now we're up to Easter Sunday. So let's look. So this is Easter. This is Easter weekend, Easter time. Let's look at the etymology of Easter. I'll pull that up for you. Okay, so Easter is interesting. It comes from the Proto-Indo-European aus, meaning to shine, oust from Proto-Germanic, meaning toward the sunshine. It means east, and then austrum, meaning dawn. We also have Auster or Stara, which is the name of a Germanic spring goddess who's often depicted with fruit and animals. And then it becomes Austermonath, which is Old Germanic for the month that we now call April. And then in Old English, it becomes Easter. And then Easter becomes the name of the Christian holiday for Christ's resurrection. And I love this. I love going into this because we are still bathing in light. And the whole theme is about facing the light, the sunshine, the dawn of a new day, the beginning. It's the beginnings. And it's the beginning of spring, renewal, regeneration, rebirth. And so it is with Christ's resurrection. So I don't know if you know this, but it was customary of the time. So crucifixion was not a Jewish tradition. It wasn't a Greek tradition, and even the Romans really didn't do crucifixion. They used that method for slaves and other classes. You weren't allowed to have a traditional burial. And so it was customary for the crucified to be put into a mass grave pit. But in Jesus's case, it had been arranged that Jesus's body was to be placed in a tomb on Joseph's property. That was on that, and this particular tomb was on the hillside that was facing east and facing dawn. And so remember that Jesus had said, it's on the third day that I will rise. That's what he prophesied. And so so his spirit left the body on the evening of the Friday, what we now call Good Friday. And then the body that evening was placed into the tomb, and the rock was placed over the entrance. And then it was in the early hours of Sunday morning, 36 hours later, around 3 a.m. Sunday, that the alchemy of resurrection took place. And it was a little time after that, in the dawning of the new day, as the dawn light was shining in that direction, that Mary and the other women had returned to properly. They didn't feel that the body had been properly dressed, and so they went with their, your aloes and spices and things like that to properly anoint the body. And found that the tomb was empty, and that the stone had been opened. And it wasn't a short time after that then in without his physical form, but through the light body, that he appeared. And every human being has a light body. We have an energy field that emanates from the physical body, a good arm's width beyond the physical body, and a good foot beyond that. But there are highly purified beings through all traditions who have been seen through their light body. And so for me, it's not a stretch. It's not a stretch for me to have a literalist point of view. So right now we're straddling the 2 points of view, which is seeing it symbolically and how it can be an example, and how these stories can be a teacher for us, but also seeing how could it be that it unfolded as it was written, and are we meant to interpret it through a literal lens that these events actually happened. So let's look at the etymology of resurrection. Let's look at that now. Okay, so we know that the re is a prefix and that it means again. And so the word, the root, surrect, comes from Latin, and there are examples of the Latin in their different forms. the grammatical instances. But essentially it means to get up, to rise. So we can say that resurrect means to again rise, right? To rise again. And then according to Etymology Online, it wasn't until the 12th century that Old French used it as a noun as the resurrection of Christ, like used it in a biblical way to describe that phenomena. So to rise again, right? Okay, so now this is not unique either, with this rising again, this phenomena through our storytelling. Because we'll find it in the mythology of the phoenix rising. So the phoenix rising mythos comes from Roman Greco, and essentially it's the story of immortality, right? In the Armenian version, at the end of the phoenix's life, the bird would fly into the sun, and then burning would become, a flame, and then plummet back to the earth, burning up until nothing remained. And then the new phoenix would arise out of the ashes. The Egyptian myth is slightly different, similar but different. So each phoenix lived for 500 years. Only one phoenix lived at a time. And then just before its time was up, it knew when its time was up, the phoenix would build a nest, set itself on fire, and then a new phoenix would arise from the ashes. Right? So this idea of rebirth and resurrection is not a new one. We can find it elsewhere, but it's teaching us, it's pointing us to that which is eternal, that which is immortal. And it's important. It's important for us to connect with that, because when we don't, we are living from a fearful place. We're afraid. We're afraid of our mortality. We're afraid of the vulnerability of our bodies, of each other's bodies. So let's consider this story next. And I happened upon this story because, as you can see, I'm back in New Jersey. I'm in my space. I'm at Alila. I flew back in Monday night, and I'm recording this now on Good Friday. And anyway, so I'm staying with my dear friend Heather, and we were actually talking about her son. He's practicing wrestling, and we were talking about how it's a mind game. And so there was a story that I believe Dan Millman had shared that I thought was appropriate for that her son could benefit from hearing. And anyway, my friend said, "Oh, was it in the way of the peaceful warrior?" I was like, I'm not sure. But anyway, she pulled the book down, so I was flicking through it, and I came across this story, and I thought, it's so perfect. Okay, so here's the story. So a saintly woman was walking along the edge of a cliff. Several hundred feet below her, she saw a dead mother lion surrounded by crying cubs. Without hesitation, she leapt off of the cliff so that they would have something to eat. And so we could say, right, we could put the view of sacrifice onto these stories, onto the crucifixion story, and onto this story of this saintly woman. We could do that. But actually, I prefer not to. I prefer that we considered these stories as examples of faith, of incredible faith in the eternal, that the body is just merely a vehicle, and we're not meant to stay here. It has a purpose. The purpose is important, and there's always something next. And this story also reminds me of a story that came out of a quantum healing hypnosis session, where in that story, and I'll keep it brief because the details are interesting, but just for the sake of brevity and time, in this particular story, some of you might have heard me tell the whole story, and maybe I'll tell it in another video. Let me know if you'd like me to do that. But to summarize, in that story, a man was pushed overboard. He was somewhere in the islands, in the Caribbean, somewhere like that, and he makes his way to an island, small island. It takes him 1 day to walk around the circumference of the island, and he's there years. But in that time, he slowed down his vibrational rate to become one with his natural environment. He became one with nature. And he also was able to play with the universal law of ask and it is given, of manifestation and creation, to think it, to speak it, and to take action. And so at some stage during the session, I asked, so how do you eat? How do you survive? How do you live? And he said that he catches fish, and that they have attained a certain level of telepathy or communication or mutual understanding, reverence, where the fish would slow down in order to be caught and eaten, because they wanted to become something else. They wanted to become a part of something else. And so then this reminds us too that this actually brings us even to quantum physics, that energy cannot be destroyed. It can just change its form. But let's imagine, right? So you're you, and you come upon this magic phoenix bird, or you are going for a walk and you happen upon this saintly woman right before she leaps off of the cliff, or you happen to be in your boat and you stumble across this deserted island and you find this man there, and you have a conversation. Or perhaps you're Cleopas or Simon in Luke chapter 24, who the risen Jesus in his light body appears before. Actually, let's look at how they react. Okay. All right, so let's be there. Let's zoom in. Okay, so there we are. We're walking along. All right, so the pre to this, so we're cutting in here. It's number 20. So Luke 24:20. So we're cutting in. So basically, these two brothers are walking along, and the light body of Jesus in his light body appears and walks with them. And so he says, oh, what were you just talking about? And so they say, oh, haven't you heard? And he says, no, I haven't heard. And so this is, we're kind of catching them mid conversation. So haven't you heard how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and have crucified him? But we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. And beside all this, today is the third day since these things were done. Yeah, and certain women also of our company made us astonished, which were early at the sepulchre. I don't know how to pronounce it, sorry. And when they found not his body, they came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels which said that he was alive. And certain of them which were with us went to the, I should have practiced, sepulchre, and found it even so as the women had said, but him they saw not. And then he said unto them, O fools, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? Suffered these things to enter into his glory. And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. And they drew nigh, these two men walking along, they drew nigh unto the village. Okay, actually, so all of them are walking into the village, whither they went, and he made as though he would have gone further. So Jesus was about to carry on, but they constrained him, saying, "Abide with us, for it's towards evening, and the day is fast spent." And so he went in to tarry with them. And it came to pass, as he sat at meat with them, he took bread and blessed it, and brake and gave it to them, and their eyes were opened. So they saw, they had the vision, and they knew him, and then he vanished out of their sight. And they said to one another, "Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us by the way, and while he opened to us the scriptures?" And so they rose up the same hour and returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11 gathered together, and them that were with them, saying, "The Lord risen indeed, and hath appeared to Simon." And they told what things they were done in the way, and he was known of them in breaking of bread. And as they thus spake, Jesus himself stood in the midst of them, and saith unto them, "Peace be unto you." But they were terrified and affrighted, and supposed that they had seen a spirit. And he said unto them, "Why are ye troubled? And why do thoughts arise in your hearts? Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit hath not flesh and bones, as you see me have." And when he had thus spoken, he shewed them his hands and his feet. And while they believed not for joy, and wondered, he said unto them, "Have ye here any meat?" And they gave him a piece of broiled fish and of an honeycomb, and he took it, and he did eat before them. And he said unto them, "These are the words which I spake unto you while I was yet with you, with all the things must be fulfilled which were written in the law of Moses and in the prophets and in the Psalms concerning me." Then opened he their understanding, that they might understand the scriptures. And he said unto them, "Thus it is written, and thus it behoved Christ to suffer, and to rise from the dead the third day, and that repentance and remission of sins should be preached in his name among all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. And ye are witnesses of these things. And behold, I send the promise of my Father upon you. But tarry ye in the city of Jerusalem until you be endued with power from on high." And it came to pass, while he blessed them, he was parted from them, and carried up into, and they worshipped him, and returned to Jerusalem with great joy, and were continually in the temple praising and blessing God. Amen. Okay, so the men have gone through the range of emotions. So they've gone through disbelief, they've gone through terror and fright, and now they have ended in joy. So my question is, would you be terrified and frightened, or would you be in awe of the realization of faith and life everlasting beyond the physical? Would that realization give you great relief and peace and freedom? Luke 24:26 reminds us that he suffered these things and they're over. That the sufferance was just a way to move, just a way, just as my sister had her way, as my father had his way, to just move from the mortal reality into life beyond the physical. And so we can see how their fear turns to joy by 24:50. That fear is transmuted into the realization of the eternal and everlasting life in light. And so this is what we are seeking within ourselves, that which is eternal, that which is always safe, that which can never be harmed, that which is beyond the body. It may at this time be inhabiting the body, but the part of us that is the bridge for the Christos to find its way, to illuminate its light, its truth through us and through our service. And this is also a message of service, that his returning is part of his ministry to ensure that we don't forget. Okay. And so in the next service, I think I will touch upon religion. We'll explore what is religion and what is religion for us here at this ministry. Do we have religion? And we will have a look at belief versus faith, and then we'll see what else comes up in the interim. Okay, so remember to check the calendar for upcoming events, the online classes, regular meditation classes, and a meditation and natural healing self-help class. The meditation class is the third Tuesday of the month, typically 7 p.m. Eastern. And the meditation and self-help class is on the fourth Monday of the month, 7 p.m. Eastern. But you can just check on the calendar to make sure the dates haven't changed. Usually they don't change because I can usually accommodate that time even if I'm traveling. And then one thing to keep in mind, if you do feel like having a day with me, we can do a 1-day spiritual meditation retreat together on June the 2nd, 1-day retreat. And then I also have a Reiki Level 1 class starting in person here. It's a 4-session class. I've got a regular Wednesday night class coming up for 4 sessions. And also I'll be doing throughout the year for 2024 full moon events. I got back here kind of around the full moon. So we'll start that up next month. All right. So thank you. May your hearts be lifted, and may the light shine bright inside your heart and inside of your mind, so that you can be yourself here, so that you can be all that you came here to be. All right. See you next time.